As we travel in time throughout the history of YMCA Camp Mason and the roots of this camp, we look at the timeline that has brought YMCA Camp Ralph S. Mason to its present. Camp Mason's dynamic impact on thousands of youth over the past 119 years is beyond human measure.
Our camp was born with a handful of young Y members camped out on the banks of the Delaware River for a week in the summer of 1900. What began as a week-long adventure for just a few evolved into the completely developed program that we have today. It is enriched as well as been influenced by each person who has taken the time to care and become part of the camp themselves. By the turn of the century, the Trenton YMCA initiated its own resident camping program for boys. Mr. James J. Wilson bought Marshall's Island on the Delaware River and donated it to the Trenton YMCA. The camp was then renamed to honor Mr. Wilson.
With the ending of Boys Camp in 1955, the weather took an abrupt change. Where the early part of the summer was exceptional for its dryness and extremely low water, August brought rains of unprecedented intensity. Disaster struck Camp Wilson, when it was almost obliterated by one of the worst floods to hit the Delaware Valley in history, prompted by Hurricane Colleen. 140 campfire girls were using the camp facilities after the regular season. At 12:45 a.m., the Frenchtown Delaware River Bridge Guard notified the director by telephone of dangerous rising floodwaters. The rest is history. After successfully effecting rescue of all the campers from the swirling Delaware, the last helicopter at noon removed Director Vernon Rossman from the waters. Miraculously, all were safe. Its original site on the island in the Delaware was wiped out by floods, and rebuilding was not an option. Despite that calamity, local YMCA groups, led by Ralph S. Mason, kept the program going without interruption, motivated by a dedication to camping and cognizant of the emotional and physical boost that a close relationship with nature can provide. In 1956, the corporation now known as Central New Jersey YMCA Camp came into existence. Also, a site near Blairstown was accepted for the new location to replace the Delaware River campsite. With assistance from volunteers from Mercer County, Trenton, Metuchen, New Brunswick, Princeton, and Rahway, fundraising was initiated in 1957. Dedication for the new Central New Jersey Camp and Conference Center occurred on June 12, 1958, with Ralph S. Mason being the president of the trustees. They came up with a strategic plan that laid out exactly what a $335,000 investment would provide in the building of the camp on the land in Blairstown. Among the buildings and plans was an outdoor chapel, an archery range, athletic fields, renovation of 6 existing buildings, waterfront lodge, health lodge, complete kitchen and cook's cabin, and a main lodge and dining room for 250 campers. Over a span of 32 years, Mr. Ralph S. Mason served the YMCA camp as camp chairman, president of Trenton YMCA, chairman of Princeton YMCA, chairman of the National Council's International Committee for 2 terms, chairman of the YMCA of the U.S., and chairman of Central New Jersey YMCA Camp. Under Ralph's leadership, international campers from Sweden and Holland were introduced to Camp Mason. To this day, international counselors as well as campers from over 50 countries interact with boys and girls of YMCA Camp Ralph S. Mason. The Board of Trustees in 1972 officially changed the name to YMCA Camp Ralph S. Mason to honor this great Y leader. Camp Mason didn't go by that name at the turn of the last century. It started out as Camp Washington and was renamed Camp Wilson, and now is being physically moved to the Blairstown location under the Central YMCA reference. A full-scale plan was begun to create donations called tributes back then, and Ralph S. Mason and key constituents worked tirelessly to continue the legacy that had begun back in 1900. 1957 was a pivotal year for leadership, vision, and creation of grounds on which Camp Mason now calls its home. Other notable events for the camp was that the camp was the first racially integrated YMCA camp in the country during the 1930s, as well as becoming the first YMCA camp nationally to go co-ed in 1957. allowing girls to participate equally in the same program traditionally offered only to boys. In addition, in that same year, Camp Mason became the first camp to build as a year-round camping facility and continues to hold the distinction in the facilities that are available at the camp. With the exclusion of home, there are only a few special places in the world where I still have an image of my father's figure in the landscape. And although these locations are scattered around the globe, there's something that binds them together. They are all the places that Ralph loved, where he felt comfortably at home, resting alongside a hiking path in Zermatt, Switzerland, an Edelweiss flower mounted in the brim of his hat, eating a piece of dark Swiss chocolate, riding on the antique tractor mowing the lawn at the farm in Pennington, picking up seashells while enjoying endless walks on the calm beaches of Sanibel Island, and of course, wandering the grounds of camp, finding the pristine arrows in the dirt and grass at the old archery.
With over 15 years already as a Y executive, there was one reason and one reason only that I did not hesitate to come to Camp Mason. And that was that I had the chance to work for and with Ralph Mason. He was a giant in the YMCA, and it was an extraordinary honor. I learned more from Ralph in 2 years than I had learned in my entire 15 years combined. He was the rare man who stood bigger and finer in person than his legend portrayed. I was a camper at Central starting the summer of 1959, the second year of camp operations. I was 7 years old. I attended camp every year until the summer of 1966. In 1967, I was a kitchen boy working in the dining hall with my cousin Steve Marks. Later that summer, I worked in the building program run by Neil Franchino and my cousin Jeff Marks. During the summer of 1968, I was a member of the YMCA International Camper Exchange. Our orientation was held at Camp Mason, and I worked as a junior counselor that summer at Camp Breivik in Sweden. In 1978, I was appointed to lead the Camp Mason Operating Committee, where I served with my brother Tom until 1982, when the Operating Committee was merged into the Board of Trustees. I was a member of the board from 1982 until 1998, and served as chairman from 1988 until 1998. I returned for a year as chairman of the board from 1999 to 2000.
Today, YMCA Camp Ralph S. Mason is located on close to 500 scenic acres in Hardwick and is one of the 10 oldest continuously operating camps in the world. The YMCA's camping program has evolved over the years from building of boys, focus of the 1890s, to today's building strong families, strong children, and strong communities, and strongly lives by the credo and those values of inclusion. YMCA Camp Ralph S. Mason occupies approximately 500 acres in northern Warren County, adjacent to the splendid wilderness of the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. The property includes 2 small lakes, the headwaters of 2 trout streams, direct access to the Appalachian Trail, and a marvelous blend of forests, fields, and mountains. The facility today includes over 40 buildings dedicated to youth camping, recreation, and education, in addition to a large dining hall seating over 250 individuals. There are 20 cabins and lodges for housing up to 400 campers at one time. Other facilities include several dedicated training conference lodges, rainy day pavilions, staff housing, a shop, craft lodge, bike barn, and the Hain Nature Education Center. For outdoor activity, the camp features several athletic fields, playing courts, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, 2 riding stables, a climbing tower, and a high and low ropes course. Also on this property is a small educational ornamental tree farm, equestrian and bike trails, wetland and nature education trails, 2 historic farm sites, and an intact circa 1850s lime kiln. We welcome a visit from you anytime to truly experience what we all love about Camp Mason.
I'm delighted to have an opportunity to speak with you this evening and to share some of my reflections on camp and the joy that I've experienced there, starting actually in the 1950s as a young first-time camper. I still remember so vividly the night sounds and the canoe trips and the sheer joy of being in the dining hall, all the singing and camaraderie. These are experiences that as a camper you take with you and treasure for many, many years to come. And in fact, friendships there have lasted a lifetime. I remember watching my brother and sister come just a few years after me and watching them grow and develop as they enjoyed their camp experience. And of course, my cousin Jeff and I were the same age, so we were in the same cabin year after year, and watching my older cousin Donna and Steve and the rest of the family, it was just an amazing part of my life and development. The opportunity to understand team building, to understand responsibility and accountability. These are attributes that serve us well later in life, that are part of the ethos of camp. I can tell you too, after all these years, that the mission is sound and as strong as ever. Just 5 years ago, our daughter Kennedy, at age 11, embarked on her first year as a camper at Camp Mason. Frankly, with a little bit of trepidation. She was concerned, traveling across the country from California at the time, to have her first camp experience. 2 weeks later, we come and pick her up. She's in buckets of tears, begging us to stay on for another 2-week session. This year will be her 5th year at camp in a row. She returns this year as a member of the staff, a CIT. The tradition lives on because of the good work you're doing. God bless you, and thanks for camp and all it does for all of us.